in LWC, whenever the component loads, there are phases in which the component loads. There are some steps before the component is completely loaded, right? And at every step, you can do certain things. And that can be done using callback methods called lifecycle hooks. Okay, these are nothing but methods. They trigger automatically at some specific phase of component lifecycle. Okay, so these are the callback hooks: constructor, connected callback, disconnected callback, rendered callback, and error callback. Okay, so there are 5 lifecycle hooks which execute automatically at some phase of the component lifecycle. Okay, so if we have components like this, so there is a parent component and there is a child component. Each component will have its own callback hooks. Okay, we can use callback hooks separately in parent, separately in child. Okay, so child will have its own, parent will have its own, and we'll see like how there will be interaction between these. Okay, so suppose we are loading a component. It contains 2 components, one parent and one child. So what happens is the component starts loading. The parent component starts loading. The first component, like lifecycle loop, that is called as constructor on parent. Okay, so we have these 5, right? Out of this, the first one that called is constructor. At this point, the component is not yet connected to DOM. It is still loading. It is starting to load. Okay, so after the constructor is called, we can actually access the public properties. Okay, whatever API properties we have, those can be updated here. Those will be updated here at this point. And then the component is connected to DOM. It is inserted into the DOM. Okay, so this is the second step. First, the component starts loading. Second step is component is inserted into the DOM. And whenever the component is connected into the DOM, it is called connected callback. This hook will be called. Okay, and then the component will display on the UI. Okay, so parent component is displayed on the UI. If there is a child component, then it will jump to child component now. Okay, at this point, the component is not fully loaded. It rendered, it is showing on the UI, but it is not the complete process yet. Process is not completed yet. So now it starts loading the child component. Child component's constructor is called. Then child component is inserted into the DOM. So whenever component is inserted into the DOM, connected callback will be called on the child. Then child is rendered, and rendered callback is called on child. Only after this rendered callback is called, the component is considered as fully loaded. Okay, so now the child component is fully loaded. Okay, after the rendered callback, and then it will jump back to parent's rendered callback. Okay, and now we can consider the entire component has loaded. Okay, so this is how the loading life cycle happens. Any questions on this so far? We'll see demo, but still, any questions? And at each phase, we can do certain things. We can do a lot of things. Okay. Any doubts? Any questions? Okay, let's do one thing. Let's do a demo and we'll come back. Okay. And Anirudh, like you were asking the question, right? How we can unload what we can do, like if we can do something. So
Yes.
this is the answer basically. I'll show you.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's start. So what I'll do, I'll just remove all this code that we have. We'll start fresh. So the parent component, I'm removing everything. And let's say this just displays parent component. And parent JS, let's remove all of this. We don't need them. And yeah, in the child also I'll remove everything. Remove all of this. Child, yes, that's right. Okay, so now we'll include all the life cycle hooks. Okay, so we have 5 life cycle hooks. So let's start with constructor. So we can just write it like this. And whenever we are writing constructor callback, we have to include super. Okay, so super is basically going to make sure the constructor of this lightning element is called, because this parent demo component is extending lightning element. So whenever we say super, the constructor of lightning element is called. This is required to set like there are certain properties in lightning element which needs to be accessed for this to work. Okay, so that's why the first line should be super whenever we are using constructor. Okay, and then let me go to, like, I'll add some console.log. I'm going to say constructor on parent is called, let's say, completed. And inside this, you can write whatever logic, right? I'm just not writing anything. I'm just leaving it. Write additional logic here. Okay. So similarly, let's include other callback hooks. So we included constructor. So let's add connected callback. Okay, for connected callback, we don't need super. Constructor connected callback, connected parent is called, completed. Let's include a rendered callback. And then we have disconnected callback. Okay, cool. So let's start now. I'm just deploying. So I have just included all the callback hooks and I have written some logic. Okay, we can write more logic. We can do a lot of things. We'll see. So right now I'm keeping it simple. I was just printing something, right? So let's reload this. Okay, so let me add certain breakpoints. Okay, so I want to stop here. Okay, here, stop here. Cool. So let's reload. So just pay attention, like how this happens. So right now we are in parent components constructor function. Okay, constructor callback. You guys can see it, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So now let me proceed and see how the flow happens. Okay. So the constructor on parent is called. It's completed. Now at this point, the component is connected to DOM, but it is not still rendered. You can see like nothing is displaying on the UI, correct? So connected callback on parent is called. Connected callback on parent is now completed. Now see what happens. Now it displays the parent component. Okay. So now the component is starting to render. Okay. It's kind of rendered. So then rendered callback is called. So when we say rendered callback is called, it is rendered actually. The component is rendered. Okay. And component render is completed. So this is how it happened. So basically, let me reload again. So it first called constructor before even the component loaded. When the component starts to load, constructor is called. Okay. So constructor logic, whatever we have written, will execute. Now constructor is completed. Connected callback is called. At this point, the element is connected to DOM, but it is not yet displayed. Okay. It is not yet shown on the UI. And now the element is displayed. Okay. It is rendered and loading is completed. So this was simple, right? Any questions so far? Okay, so how it loads in phases, right? So now let's include a child component also. So let me copy all this. I'll include all of these callback hooks in child also. Okay, so I'm including all this in child also, and I'm going to call this child in parent. Okay, so I'll call this component seq-child demo. Okay, so now let me deploy this child. Deploy parent. Sorry, click something else. Okay, so now let's see how this works. So now nothing is loaded on the page. It's called, it is calling constructor on parent. Okay, so let's also, I didn't deploy it, is it? Deployed child demo. Let's see if it loads. It's running on parent only. Child is not included. Any issue you see in this code? Child demo. Child demo. Do you guys see any issue in the code, any typo? I don't know what was the issue. There was maybe a typo. So now we have child component, and child component also has these hooks. Okay. And we want to see the order in which all of these things execute. Okay. So now we are in constructor of parent, right? So the parent constructor is called, let me add them properly, the breakpoints. Yeah. So now we are in parent components constructor. That completed. Now connected callback on parent is called. Connected callback and parent is completed. Parent is rendered, right? So now let's see what happens. Okay, so it actually jumped to child constructor, right? Constructor on child is called. It did not call the render callback on parent. Now it jumped to child. So child constructor is called. It's completed. Child connected callback is called. It's completed. Then child's rendered is called and child is rendered now. Child component is rendered, right? And now child component is fully rendered. Now let's see what happens. It jumps back to parents constructor, parents rendered callback, right? And it's completed. Now both the components are loaded. Okay. Any questions so far? You want to see it again, the flow? Let me do it again. So this basically explains us like how the components load actually, right? So we are in parents constructor. Okay. The constructor is called on parent. Then connected callback is called this. Now the parent component is connected to DOM. Okay. So connected callback is called on parent. Now it jumps to child. So child's constructor is called. Then child's connected callback is called. Now child component is connected to DOM. And now child component is rendered on the DOM. Okay. And then it goes back to parents rendered callback. Okay. Cool. Any questions? Any doubts so far? Okay. So now let's add certain things more. Okay. So let's create one more component. Let's call it, I have created here, child demo 2. Okay. So right now it has nothing. So nothing is there. So let's write some code. I'm just going to copy this. And this is component 2. Okay. Component 2. And in this also we'll include all the callback hooks. Okay. Child. So deploy this. And I'll call this from parent HTML. So I'll include, and let's see how it loads if there are multiple components, right? So I'm loading this again. Where is child demo 2? Just 1 second. Child demo 2. Child demo 2. Yeah, correct. Demo 2 is not deployed. Just 1 second. There is only child demo. Okay, let's see. Let me go through this. I'm just going quickly through this. Child demo 2 is not loaded. Okay. We don't have it yet. C colon child demo 2. You see any typos here? Really weird. Okay, let's do one thing. Instead of doing this, I'll include this child demo 2 one more time. Why it is not working? Do you guys see any typo? This is my component, child demo 2. Child demo 2.
उसमें पेपर होता है ना।
Sure. Just 1 second, we'll just figure this out. Demo 2 demo. Let me do one thing. I'll add the child demo only twice. Okay, instead of doing this, I'll add it twice here. So basically, I want the child component to render twice. Okay. Yeah. So parent components constructor is called, right? So let's go on. So constructor is done. Connected callback is called. Connected. The parent is rendered. Then it jumps to child. Child components constructor is called. Child components is connected callback is called. Rendered callback is called. It's rendered. Yeah. And it came back. The parent. Oh, it's not rendering again. Deployed this, right? Many times. Now it is coming. I don't know what was happening. Okay, so now we have child demo 2, and here also there are connect. You guys with me?
Yep.
Yeah. So now currently parent super, this is called constructor, right? So now let's see what happens. So constructor is completed in parent, then connected callback and rendered callback. So connected callback is called on parent. Now the component parent is rendered. Now it jumped to child constructor. Okay. So child constructor is called, connected callback is called on child. Then rendered callback is called, child component is rendered. And we are rendering it twice. Let's see what happens. It again went back to the child super like constructor, right? So it is rendering again. And it did not call the connected callback, right? Rendered callback and child. So now let's see what happens. It jumps to rendered callback on child. And then child demo is called. Okay. So child component rendered twice, and 2, child demo 2 is called. Its constructor is called. Its connected callback is called. Its rendered callback is called. And finally, now what should happen? Anyone? So it goes back to parents rendered callback. After all the components within all the child components are loaded, it goes back to rendered callback on parent, right? And then the whole component is loaded. Okay. So let's do one thing. Let's keep only one of this, only one child and one child demo. Is it making sense to everybody? Like the flow?
Yep.
Yeah. Now let's do it one more time. Just pay attention and stop me if anything is not making sense. Points go here and there when we make changes to code. Okay, so we start from constructor on parent, right? Constructor is done, connected callback is called on parent. Now the component is connected to DOM, it's rendered, and it jumped to child component. So child components, this is called, constructor is called, connected callback is called. Now the child component will be rendered, and rendered callback is called on parent, a child, right? And now it jumps to child component 2, and child components 2's constructor is called, connected callback is called. Now it is rendered, and rendered callback is called, and finally it comes back to the parent component's rendered callback, right? So this is how it is working. If we have two components, right? What if we nest it one more level, right? Instead of keeping it here, I'll call this component from the child component, okay?
At first your parent, then your child, then it goes
Yes.
to the nested. Your nested gets done first, then it comes to the child
Yes.
demo, then it comes outside.
Correct. So I'll include this in child component here. Okay. Deploy this. Everybody is following, right? I'm just making sure like nobody misses this. This is important. Okay, so constructor is called on parent, right? Constructor actually executed. Where is it right now? No, constructor is called. Then connected callback is called. Now the parent will be rendered, and then it goes to child component, right? Child components, constructor, right? And then it goes to, let's include this. Yeah. So now it is in constructor to connected callback to child component, right? It didn't call the render callback and child now, right? So it jumped to child component 2. So constructor connected callback, and then child component 2 is rendered callback, and child component 2 is called. Now what happens? What should happen now?
Goes to child demo.
Yes. So it jumps back to child components rendered callback, right? So child components rendered callback is done. Now it jumps back to parents rendered callback, right? And now the entire component is loaded. So this is how the lifecycle flow is. Okay. So let's go back. So let's review this one more time to make sure it's making sense. Okay. So basically this is the flow. Component starts loading. Okay. Somebody is joining, 1 second. Yeah. So the component starts loading. And then constructor on parent is called. And at this point, I have not shown this, but at this point we can access like public properties are updated. And then the component is inserted in DOM, but it is not displayed. It is not rendered. The connected callback is called. And when the component is connected to DOM, and then component is rendered now. And then it jumps to child. If there is a child component, it jumps to child. Then child component will be rendered. After the rendered callback is called on child, it will come back to the parent. Is the flow clear to everybody? Okay. So now let's cover some things. So basically, constructor runs when the component starts to load. Okay, component is not yet connected to DOM. It's just started loading. So we cannot access any public properties in constructor, and child elements are not available. Like child is not yet loaded. Child loads only after this, right? At this point. So at this point, you cannot access child at all. Okay. And you cannot access public properties also because public properties are updated here, right? So in the constructor, you don't have public properties. Okay. Then why do we need it? When do we use it, right? So we can actually use it to some do prep work. You want to prepare some data, like get metadata, initialize some state, like you want to cache some data, you can use this constructor. Okay. The best practice is avoid some complex operations here because component is not yet loaded. So trying to do something complex can cause some confusing behaviors. So avoid async calls, avoid DOM manipulation. Why? Because the component is not in the DOM yet. If you try to modify DOM, it will basically throw error, right? So avoid trying to manipulate DOM. Okay. So considerations, first statement in constructor should be super. Don't use return statements and don't use document.write, document.open because connect component is not in the DOM yet. So constructor clear to everybody, when to use it, what it does, when it fires. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's about constructor. Now connected callback. This is the most important lifecycle hook. So runs when the component is attached to the DOM, right? At this point, component is connected to the DOM. So this is the most used lifecycle hook. At this point, component is loaded in the DOM, but not rendered yet. Okay, component is not yet rendered. It is attached to DOM, and you can actually access and modify public properties. And you can also access this by use like any elements using this dot template. We saw that this dot template dot access some elements, right? So you can use this inside this connected callback. And at this point, we have access to public properties, which are exposed through @API. Okay. So what can we do using this? We can change the look and feel of the component before rendering. We can actually modify the DOM. We can modify the CSS if you want to. We can get data and metadata if needed. So Anirudh, basically, if you want to get data, you can do this in connected callback, like to display how many times this page has loaded. You can query from one table and display it, right?
Okay.
And on load, you can also, in this, you can actually go and update the database also. So whenever connected callback is called, you go and update the database so that you know how many times this component was loaded. Right?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So we can also set listeners, event listeners. We'll see it in the next class. The next class only we'll see event listeners. So you can also set up local storage caching, right? You can do in this also, but better do it in connected callback. Don't do it in constructor. If you want to get some data, cache it, do it here. You can subscribe to events. You can navigate to a different page. Like on page load, you want to redirect somewhere, you can do it here. And you can also load some third-party libraries if you want to in connected callback. But child components are not available yet, right? So when we are running this connected callback, the child component is not yet started to load. So we cannot access the child components, right? So child components are not available yet, cannot access anything on child. Generally fires only once on page load. Like this connected callback runs only once, but that is not always true, right? I'll show you. Like it can fire multiple times if the component is removed and added again. Like if you change something, you remove from one location, add it in another location, or you do some key changes or something changes, it can fire again. It generally fire only once, but it can fire again and again in certain cases. Okay. So any questions on connected callback? Okay. So let's move to rendered callback. Okay. So This runs only when the component is completely rendered. Okay, component is rendered, that's when it is caught. So this we can use to perform some logic after the component has finished rendering, right? Child components are available. At this point, when we are running the rendered callback, can we say the parent is already loaded? Everything is done on parent, like child, sorry. Everything is done on child. So child component is available. So we can modify child component if you want to. The child component available can be used to modify child component, can be used to add event listeners also here. And this can be a dangerous lifecycle hook, like you have to handle it carefully because this can fire multiple times. It can get called every time the variable that is displayed on the UI is changed. Every time a variable changes, it can fire. Okay, we have to be very careful with. I'll show you that. Be careful what functionality you include inside this because it calls again and again. And it can get into endless loops. If we modify something within this, if you modify a variable within this lifecycle loop, it can actually get into endless loops. Okay, kind of recursive loop. To run this, to run this only once, you can use one variable, just like what we do in trigger to stop recursion, right? We use one Boolean variable, set it to true when the trigger runs first time. So we can do exact same thing here to stop this from running again and again. We can use one Boolean variable, update it to true, and every time it will not execute, right? It will be called, but logic inside that we will put it in a condition. Okay, so let's see a quick demo for this. Any questions, anyone? Okay, so you can see my screen, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So what we will do, we'll create one simple variable just to show this rendered callback. We're getting called again and again. So let's say I have one variable here, property. Let's call it input value, just a string, right? And I will create one input field here. Typing input value is input value, and we have to include on change, right? On change, handle change, okay. And then we want to display this input value, okay, here. And I will include this handle change here. We'll have an event. Start input value, okay. So simple thing I have done, I have just added one variable like property and a field, okay. So let's deploy this. And let's see how it works, okay. I'm just closing this so that everything loads at once. So everything is loaded. So I'll inspect one more time and go to sources and parent. So in parent, we have created, where is the rendered callback? Yeah, I'm just putting some breakpoints here. So I'm updating something in the field. Okay. So it's going to update. What happened? You see, rendered callback is called, right? So only then it rendered again, right? So let me add one more thing, A, B. Okay, so let me remove all this. This is all distraction. Just 1 second. So rendered callback is called again. I'll type C, rendered callback is called again. See, like it's getting called every time I change, like try to modify this variable, right? Because this variable is displayed on the UI and UI is re-rendering, right? So every time the component re-renders, it will call rendered callback again. So that's the behavior. Okay. So can you see how it can cause issue if we have some complex logic within this rendered callback? It gets called every time, right? You guys with me?
Yep.
Yeah. So be careful what you put inside this rendered callback because it can get called every time the UI re-renders, right? So which is not a good thing, right? Cool. So let's go back. So how do we handle this? Let me just show you one. I'll not do a lot of things. I'll just quickly explain how we can avoid it from happening again and again. So here inside this rendered callback, put one if is rendered is a property. This dot is rendered. If it is true, then don't go. If it is not true, only then execute this logic, right? So first time when it comes here, we'll set this to true here. This dot rendered, this dot is rendered is equal to true. So every time it comes, the first time this will get to set to true and every time this will bypass. Okay, it will not execute this logic, just like what we do in triggers.